Okay. So this is Hilchos Beis Bechira, first mitzvah, and the mitzvah of the Rambam, and the Rambam writes, mitzvahs, I say, it's a positive mitzvah, lasa, is to make bayis la Hashem, a house for Hashem. And what's its purpose? The Rambam clearly writes, and you can see in English over here, Muchan liyes makrivim bei hakarbonas. Okay, to be able to put the korbanos there, that is. And we'll read now in English. It is a positive obligation to build a house for Hashem where offerings may be brought and to make pilgrimage to it 3 times a year. Okay. And that's in that section, and we come into a festival, Chag, like we talk about the Hebrew Chag, we go there and have our festivals there. And the verse says, "V'oseli migdash." We understand it from the textual verse. "V'oseli migdash," you'll make for me a holy place. We can translate it sanctuary. There was one already built. It's parish the Torah. It's already explained in our Torah. The Mishkan, that there was a sanctuary. It's called Mishkan. She'asa Moshe Rabbeinu, that Moshe Rabbeinu built, and quite categorically, the Rambam writes, "V'hoya lefi sha." It was of temporary nature, as it says, and as another verse in the Torah, "Ki lo ba'osam ad ata," because you have not reached it yet. Okay, so that tells us that there is a requirement, for us to have a temple, a Bais L'Hashem, and that its job is to muchan liyas makrivim. It has to be prepared and able to do the sacrifices there. And further, what is what does it take? What does it need? The chapters continue and the paragraphs continue. Basically, this one tells us there was some history about what happened previously. Other temporary ones were till they were settled in Jerusalem, and then in paragraph 3, Kivan Shenivna Mikdash B'Yerushalayim. Now, once a temple had been built in Jerusalem, Nesra Kol Makomas, any other place was any other of the temporary places which were previously in existence and are no longer operable, and they're void. And the building was built Binyan Shabon Shlema. It was built by Shlomo Melech, as described in the Book of Kings. Okay, and then we come to paragraph 6, and he tells us what's inside. Okay, so or what are the main requirements of the building of the temple? So Eisen Bei Kedesh Kedoshim, we have to have a Kodesh Kedoshim, that a place for the holies, the Holy of Holies, and another section prior, and before that there will be an area called the Kedesh, B'Moknom Shehu Nikra Ulam, and then there's a further, and then we have the Kodesh Kedoshim, we have the Kedesh, we have the Kodesh Kedoshim, and B'Hoya Lifnei HaKedesh Mokom Echad B'Hu Nikra Ulam, and there's another pre-area, and then it has a larger area, and then all of that is called, those 2 areas are called the Heichul, and then we have a chotza, and we make a mechitza acheres, and then we make a separation about it, and then some curtains, and we build another area. So again, translated everything's enclosed by this wall and represents a yard. That's the of the court of the Azara, and the whole compound is called the Mikdash. So therefore, it constitutes 3 areas. Now, in that area, um, and what we do in it. So we've described physical characteristics of it. Now we go on to the other aspects of it. But Esim b'mikdash kalim, we make kalim there. We make vessels. We know, and we have to have those vessels, and we're gonna name them mizbeach. We have an altar for the burnt offering, offerings for the shar korbanos, and any other korban, any other offering or sacrifice which was brought there. There's also a constituent, a keves, a ramp, and it's situated in this physical space. That it's before the ulam on the south side. There's also the wash basin, the kior, the basin and its base. I mentioned down over here. I mentioned the base, and then further, there's other aspects of it, and then as we said, and when the wash basin, the can, and wash their hands, their feet, to do their purpose, but the kingdom in its place is in the ulam, the mizbeach, Moshe, the south side, and little in the corner of the southwest side. The mikdash, before you go to the mikdash. We also have to have a mizbeach with teres. We also have to have an altar for the mizbeach. We have to have the menorah. We have to have the shulchan, the shulchan, or shloshtam, and these three articles, the mizbeach of teres, the altar for incense, the menorah, and the shulchan are the three things which are in this section of the Kodesh. Okay. So I'm going to stop the sharing at the moment. We've seen the text. Okay. So the text has now told us that we need a physical place, a physical location. We need objects inside the temple to be able to do the purpose of the sanctuary, which is a place or a physical location where we can do the korbanos. Okay, that's the Rambam. That's the Rambam's opinion. So, and by mentioning the utensils in this particular manner, the Rambam underscores a theme that he writes in another place, that all the objects that are within the temple that we listed, all the objects in the construction of the sanctuary, they are all there to perform the various different elements of sacrificial worship required in the Beis Din, because after all, we've just said that its purpose and the requirement is for everything that's needed for the temple. So therefore, that is to tell us that the specific mitzvah, the commandment, osali migdash, to build for me a sanctuary, right, is a mitzvah in itself, and it contains other sub-mitzvahs, and those sub-mitzvahs, those sub-commandments, means that I need to be able to run the Beis Hamikdash, and in order to run the Beis Hamikdash, the sub-mitzvahs of them mean I need anything which is necessary to run the Beis Hamikdash with. In fact, the Rambam considers that the commandment to osali mikdash, to build the Mishkan, is a primary mitzvah. There's no need to specify as a mitzvah, as a specific commandment, the building of the other utensils, because they're all subsumed in the idea of running the Beis Hamikdash. Okay. In the legal code, we have a definition, and we have other commentators, and the Nachmanides is called called the Ramban with an N, right? So we're always trying to emphasize those two. There is the famous codifier called the Ramban with Maimonides with the M at the end because his name was Maimon. He was Moshe ben Maimon, and there's Nachmanides, we call him in English, or Ramban, and he was a codifier that wrote a commentary to the Rambam's work. In his work, he writes quite clearly that he begs to differ, and that he considers that the construction of the Beis Hamikdash, the Osili Mikdash, should be considered one mitzvah, and the fashioning of all the other utensils that are required to run the different objects to run the operations within the Beis Hamikdash area, they are considered separate mitzvahs. And he writes that the utensils are actually not part of the structure. The commandment of Osili Mikdash is a structural mitzvah, but the operational aspect is a different mitzvah. And rather, there are two mitzvahs, and in fact, he considers they are not dependent one on each other. A major implication that comes out of that is that he says that if their utensils don't exist, then the running of the Beis Hamikdash is possible that in some respects, because you should be able to offer the sacrifices in the Beis Hamikdash, even if you don't have some of the basic utensils. That doesn't mean that he considers everything not there, but he just, from the point of view of saying that one is not dependent on the other. We briefly touched on a similar idea once before when we spoke about tefillin, and we mentioned that the tefillin of the hand and the tefillin of the head are two separate mitzvahs, even though they combine together to fulfill the ideas of prayer. But nevertheless, they are two separate mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah of the hand, the mitzvah of the head, but they join together and they coalesce in one. The Ramban, it says that the mitzvahs, these mitzvahs are not dependent one on the other. And as I said, an implication of that, right, is whether if something's lacking, would it be possible to fulfill some parts of the mitzvahs of running the Beis Hamikdash. With this ideal, with this approach that we've separated out from the point of view of the Ramban or the Rambam not separated, we can try to understand some other issues which relate to the Beis Hamikdash. The difference of opinion between these two authorities is perhaps a representative of a divergence of approach within another idea. And what might that be? In the Sefer HaMitzvahs, in the Rambam's list, where he lists and categorizes all the specific mitzvahs, the Rambam describes the mitzvah of building the Beis Hamikdash as a place to make a house for service where services will be offered. That is to say, right, he places an emphasis, as we saw in that text that we looked at, he places an emphasis on the Beis Hamikdash as being a center area for sacrificial worship of Hashem. We have inferred that without the utensils necessary for this service, the sacrifices couldn't be offered. Therefore, the mitzvah of building the Beis Hamikdash, as we said, then would necessarily include the mitzvah as sub-mitzvahs, fashioning the utensils necessary for the worship. And therefore, we saw the text how it was written. it has to be a place where everything is prepared for sacrifices to be offered. But the other approach, the approach of Nachmanides, Ramban, seems to want to differentiate that from an operational point of view, that there is a mitzvah just for the purposes of running the operational side, or one mitzvah that incorporates everything. The Rambam, by contrast, sees the construction of the Beis Hamikdash as a commandment which just has the goal of itself being for a separate idea, that operational needs and the building itself are two separate ideas. And by dividing those ideas, we can potentially understand, have a deeper insight in the Beis Hamikdash. According to the Rambam's view, and according to his commentary on the Chumash, he says that the purpose of the Mishkan, and by extrapolation, the purpose of the Beis Hamikdash, was that there should be a geographical location, which is a place for the revelation and a resting place for a divine presence. And that this divine presence should have a geographical location, and the building should, by extension of our thoughts, should be a place of divine reflection. And with that, we can understand other thoughts that some of the commentators have, and we find dispersed in the Talmud from place to place, that the Beis Hamikdash had to be a place of grandeur and beauty, a place of befitting the King of all kings, and as an extension of that, there are other rules which relate to there's a mitzvah of the Kahanim, of the priests and Levites, to be surrounding the temple as an honor guard, typically like an honor guard, and that aspect of the honor guard, of honor, right, is there because according to one line of thinking, or we could say according to the Rambam's line of thinking, we would say that their main job is to be an honor guard, and a guard of honor. Right? While according to Maimonides, you could say potentially that it's not as necessary, and we find one differential, without going to the specifics of it, but we find a differential between the amounts of guards and what numbers they are, and what they're doing at different times of the day within the operational running of the temple, and we can understand that from the point of view that according to the Rambam, who says that it's one mitzvah, osali mikdash, the building me the sanctuary, and the operational aspects is one mitzvah. Therefore, he would emphasize that the needs of the honor guards will be at the time when, although they're there 24/7, but the needs are because they can when they're doing operational activities, there doesn't necessarily have to be an honor guard around, because just the people there who are doing in the running and the functioning of it constitute an honor guard. According to the Rambam, according to Nachmanides, who says that there is a specific mitzvah to honor the temple, you would need to have the replicate or the required honor guard there 24/7 the entire time, for the purpose of just being there and being a guard of honor, as we see in, not for security purposes, but simply for honoring the temple, and he would derive it out of this specific mitzvah. And then moving to what we mentioned previously, we would say that the sacrificial worship, the doing of the sacrifices, would be another activity which you can actually divide and separate out. According to the Rambam, he would say that it's all part and parcel of the one mitzvah, while according to Nachmanides, he would differentiate it and say that the building of the building of the utensils are a different mitzvah in itself, and therefore are not sub mitzvahs in the tally of mitzvahs in relationship to the mitzvahs which are part of the Beis Hamikdash. And that's a valid line of thinking. However, on further investigation, we have to come to a conclusion that even though this is their stated opinions, nevertheless, they both, in some respects, agree to each other and don't disagree, because they both agree that the end goal operational requirements are there, but we're just stating what is their sources and how we understand it. So although the Rambam maintains that the building of the utensils is part of the mitzvah of constructing the Beis Hamikdash, the offering of the sacrifices is not dependent on the presence of all the utensils, and the Rambam even considers that we're allowed to offer sacrifices on the altar, even when the Beis Hamikdash as a whole has been destroyed. Although we don't do that in a practical sense, but he could hold that way. So it seems that we've come to, even though we've come to a legal differentiation about where the derivation of the mitzvahs are, nevertheless we see that they can share the same opinion in relationship to operational sides. So the Rambam describes that the Rambam also describes, if we looked at those words that we had before, I'll just bring back and I'll share that text again. And although we were looking at we were looking at this paragraph 6, that you have to build a Beis Hamikdash with its vessels, and remembering that, and noting that he names this chapter the chosen temple. So therefore, these are all parts of the one mitzvah of the temple. Nevertheless, if we go back to the beginning, where we gave us that the mitzvah in general, he quite clearly says that the mitzvah is to build Bayis LaHashem, a house for Hashem. Its intent is where offerings may be brought. but he's written Bais Lashem, the house for Hashem, and he's worked it out for Osili Mikdash out of this idea of build for me a sanctuary, not just for the running of it, but also for the Bais Lashem. So even though we're structuring a legal argument of saying that there is a difference in perhaps the source and derivation of where they have to, which is the exact mitzvah. Nevertheless, we see that there is that understands the logic that the Rambam considers that you have to build a bayis, right, as well as all the other utensils, even though they're wrapped in as one. So we see that there is in the one mitzvah multiple parts, as we mentioned. But we can also say in relationship to the Ramban, Mathematics also, that the Rambam, even though he says that the purpose of the Beis Hamikdash, the purpose of the temple, is just for itself to be a place of beauty and a resting place for God. Nevertheless, he also understands that it has to be a centralized place of worship for the fundamental goal of doing the operational side of what you need in the temple. And there are passages from the Torah which clearly indicate this emphasis, because it says that these are the places where you'll bring your burnt offerings, your sacrifices. So we can see that there is both opinions, but just differentiating themselves in terms of where they would consider their source of the mitzvah to be, and therefore we can say that really, even though one derives it from one mitzvah, even though the Rambam considers it one mitzvah with sub mitzvahs, and the Ramban considers it two separate mitzvahs, we could say that we can quite confidently say that they're not excluding their other opinions. That the difference between the perspectives stems from the choice of the dimension which they're choosing to stress. The Rambam is speaking as his book describes. The Rambam's book, his legal work, the Mishnah Torah, its whole purpose is to tell you the legal code, to express the Jewish religion within a legal code, and telling you what the mitzvahs are and how you are supposed to go about them. So we can understand that the Rambam's purpose and his alignment is to emphasize the practical aspects, or maybe the aspects which relate to physicality, to the physical world, to being able to of what we need to do. And we can say that therefore the Rambam is speaking about the Beis Hamikdash in terms of the different mitzvahs, the different commandments which need to be fulfilled by man. So in this case, you can say it's man orientated. It's from the point of view that the operational aspects that man has to do. And hence he's emphasizing the sacrificial worship, and then all the components that you need to do that sacrificial worship. The Ramban, on the other hand, is focusing on another idea. The Ramban is, when he's looking at the essential purpose of the sanctuary, is looking from God's point of view to say that God is looking for a resting place in this world. God is looking for a dimension, for a geographical location where the people of the world, the Jewish nation and the people of the world, can come to a physical location and see the glory of God. And hence the building has to be a beautiful building. It has to have an honor guard, and it has to have components which are beautifully fashioned, and there's an emphasis in that. the details which relate to the operational side of things, that's a separate mitzvah, and the other kalim and all the other different things which are in there. It's a different dimension of describing the temple. So with that, we can say that they're from the place where they're coming from, where the place where Rambam's coming from in relationship to understanding the text and writing the laws in his Mishnah Torah is has aligned his thought to be able to say that there is one mitzvah, Osali Mikdash, and it incorporates all the operational aspects and building the kalim. While the Ramban is separating it out and is talking about God's presence, and then as well talking about the operational side of this. So both of these purposes and manifestation of God's presence, and from the Rambam's point of view, and both of their point of views, but emphasized by the Ramban, and man's sacrificial worship, but nevertheless will come and will reach its ultimate fulfillment in the time when the third temple will be built. Because in the future, when the third temple will be built, as we've described before, in the prophecy of Yechezkel, that there is an aspect which is godly. God will come. It says that God will come down and with the finished Beis Hamikdash, and that also there's commandments that man has to do the commandments. And there will be an aspect of God's presence coming down, perhaps even in a physical sense. And that's what's not clear in the literature. And there's definitely an aspect of man doing all the operational side, what he needs to do it. And no doubt our study and our discussion of the different elements of the Beis Hamikdash and how we're talking about the construction and the different aspects will help in building in a spiritual sense that the Beis Hamikdash and everything there and everything that we will see in the third temple. And that shows us another aspect that I've heard that the Rebbe say. I recall hearing the Rebbe saying, and certainly it's in print, that this gives us this discussion and this understanding lends itself and gives importance to everything that we do in a practical sense, because everything that we do in a practical sense lays the framework for the third temple, for the times of Mashiach, and everything that we do lays the pathway for what we do for the future. And that just like it's so important to do whatever's necessary in order to bring the implementation of the actual temple one step closer than we by our studying, and the importance, and this lays the importance of our studying, that everything that we're doing and what we do brings us one step closer towards it. And I'll stop sharing the screen now. And everything that we do will, brings us one step further in the building of the temple.